ideas with you. It's a privilege for me to be here at your Shura. Thank David Gray for asking me here this morning to share these ideas and a journey with you today. I'm here to share what humanism is and the form my personal journey to it took. It's clear to me that Scripture, in the largest sense, has nourished and satisfied, sustained and comforted all the believers here, especially in the most trying aspects of life: confusion, despair, death of loved ones, daily life. And that nourishment and sustenance and comfort may well have saved your lives, or the quality of your lives. But there are many others, some of whom are here today, much like you in almost every way, who have faced those same challenges and not felt any nourishment, sustenance, and comfort from the source that rescued you, that you rely on. And I'm here to share in part what the world looks like from their non-believers' viewpoint. I want to begin by sharing a strong first statement. I am not here, I did not come here to kick dung on anyone here for what they believe or don't believe. I hope all of you realize what I'm going to share are observations, few of which I guess, I'd hope, apply to anyone here. Observations rather than accusations. Although I'll be making observations about religions, it's highly probable that none of these may touch your particular situation. Can't believe that anyone here would be involved in any of the situations I'm going to bring up. Just being part of this organization would clearly be proof that the concerns I have, and that all non-believers have, about the abuses of people triggered by religious zeal could be connected to any individuals here in this special space for your special goals. I am not, after all, pounding on the podium. Yeah, besides it, just... I also want to make it clear that I think churches and mosques and temples do a lot of good in their communities. They probably do most of the good that gets done. But a few others in that same faith community do things that erode and poison the effects of the most that do good. Humanists got to where they are philosophically, by answering the same questions you all asked that got you to your past current destination. What is a human? Is there purpose in life? Is there meaning in life? Where do humans come from? And we just all came up with different answers that led us to different belief systems. I used to speak at Kiwanis and Rotary groups to explain what the world looked like from our position, which is well out toward one end of the belief-non-belief curve, as you might imagine. The fact that there's a line between the believers and the non-believers. We think that last believers are the Unitarian Universalists, and we're the first group over the line. I started those talks at Rotary clubs with a little quiz, and I'm going to share it with you. Please raise your hands if each one of these is true for you. You vote regularly? Pay taxes? Raise your families? Sure. Take care of your home, mow your lawn, all that kind of stuff, you bet. Recycle? You do. You support your community? Yeah. I was a police officer for 16 years. So. Any veterans here? Yeah, I served in the Army. Read the Bible? I've done that. Anyone here been to Mass? Okay. Thanks, that's the end of the quiz. But although we live very similar and parallel lives, 3 recent presidents, both Bush's and Ronald Reagan, say I can't be a good American because I don't believe in God. Does that seem fair to you? Yeah. I have a strong belief that many religions and religious communities and believers try hard to do the right thing for their communities and the planet they inhabit. I believe that religion is a powerful energizer that most use for good and some use for other purposes. I think much of the prejudice, terror, and violence in the world caused by a minority of prejudiced, terrorizing, and violent people that some religion or cult has energized and motivated. I think much of the harm of religion and beliefs inflicted on others comes from people cherry-picking obscure passages and using them to inflict pain and trauma and their bigotry on others, instead of the nourishment and comfort that you have found in other passages. The common belief of many humanists is that you don't need a God to be good, but if you want to do some powerful evil, it really helps to have a God in your back pocket. Recent example, megachurch pastor Robert Jeffress told Fox News that the president's critics worship the pagan god of the Old Testament, Moloch, who allowed for child sacrifice. Really? I mean, I haven't been to the Moloch church for a while. And I've been protesting Trump for quite a while. I'd quietly suggest that non-believers are not your enemies, but people like this are, and they're our enemies too. I'm also here to share my path to humanism and to share our approach to living our lives, though I don't purport to speak officially for my chapter, or certainly all of its members. I'm sure you realize that most people tend to see everyone in a group they aren't in as very homogeneous, but realize the groups they are in can be quite heterogeneous. Herding cats come to mind. We have, by the way, a standard but interesting bell curve of various positions and approaches and energy levels, probably wider than most groups, and that even includes what our members call themselves. Some use non-believers, some use the term atheist, others think atheist is much too strong a term, many say they're humanists, others say agnostics. I mean, if we can't even agree. My favorite bumper sticker is militant agnostic. I don't know, and you don't either. Atheist, of course, means without theism, though many people seem to think it means anti-theist. And some atheists certainly act that way. But it only means without theism. Atheists generally don't have a worldview or tell people how to live. They're just people who believe that extraordinary claims mandate extraordinary evidence. That's Carl Sagan's cautionary reminder. But it's probably germane to share that it's not atheists who are shooting doctors, and it's not atheists who are raping tens of thousands of altar boys. And it's not atheists who are flying airplanes full of people into buildings full of people. And it's not atheists who are killing their neighbors in the Middle East or Northern Ireland or Myanmar or Africa or anywhere because they're the wrong kind of atheist. Non-believers used to be scorned by almost everyone. Well, I'm not sure why. The most recent Pew Research Center Religious Landscape Report, which came out last month, reports there are now more nuns than any other subgroup. That's N-O-N-E-S. Okay, everybody tracking that one?
Don't have it.
Very good.
I'm supposed to get the jokes.
I'm sorry, I'll stop.
From 2009 to 2019, nuns have jumped from 17 to 26%. Catholics, meanwhile, have slipped from 23 to 20%. The largest group in the survey was nuns. That doesn't mean one side's winning and one side's losing. It's only a signal that more of us need to work together, as you are doing here. And with the emergence of the nuns into the mainstream, now there are even more once excluded hands to put to work, to do the work that needs to be done. I'll share a favorite story with you that may have some resonance. Some years ago, there was an effort to restart an atheist chapter in Eugene. Now you wouldn't think of all the places in Oregon that you'd have to restart such a group in Eugene, but that was the case. They started meeting every Friday evening to work out structures and goals and such. And apparently by the 5th meeting, they'd broken into 2 groups and they weren't speaking to each other. Sound familiar? My favorite term for non-believers is apatheist, as in apathetic about theology. Because for most of us, that's about where it sits. Even these few humanists here that I brought in to pack the house wouldn't agree with everything I say about humanism this morning. Some have more strident views about many things, and some are less strident. 20 plus years ago at early Sunday meetings, the humanist group, we'd have a reading from a book of humanist philosophy to assist mostly new people to get a sense of our philosophical positions. We always hope to get through several pages of the book during the meeting, but normally after a couple of sentences, somebody'd say, well, I don't think that's true. And the discussion would start. Sound familiar? So I'm a humanist. What does that mean? What do humanists do? Well, think of a church. Main event on Sunday morning. When else? You know what I mean? Our first meeting in January will be Sunday meeting number 1108. People come in early to help with the chairs, make the coffee, set up the sound system, just like happened today. There's a 90-minute meeting with announcements and a collection reminder at the end. There's coffee and cookies with the speaker and each other after the meeting. It's our version of coffee and cookies in the church basement after the sermon. There are discussion groups. There are committee meetings and lots of visiting. We clean up the place. Some of us meet for lunch afterwards. During the month, there are other committee meetings, board meeting, lots of emails flying around, a potluck. The humanist helpers visit the sick, help people move, take care of others' pets as needed. Our 2 book clubs meet. Some people work at the local food bank. Some of the members give blood or work on community service outside the group, individually. We have 2 variety shows a year. My friend Al manages those, with some of our members performing up in front of the rest of us in the audience. Some people call it a talent show, but there's more variety than talent. David Gray, by the way, is part of the talent show. He sings some pretty fancy songs, mostly lieder, I think, so pretty formal Germans.
Yeah.
I'm part of the variety show. It's a vibrant community with about 150 members. Some are more involved than others. Does that sound familiar? Here's what makes us humanists rather than a church. Take away all the supernatural, mythological beliefs and stories. No gods, no devils, no heaven, no angels, no miracles, no hell, no afterlife, no prophecies, no ideas you can't challenge, nothing you can only accept on faith without any proof. And the main event on Sunday morning isn't a sermon, it's a lecture about recently Russian astronomy in the 19th century, memories of a Northwest pioneer girl, the 14th in a series about understanding poetry, and a recent program from the Oregon Symphony's assistant concertmaster, talking about music and playing for us. Normal audience Sunday morning of 50 or so, there are usually 3 to 5 PhDs and MDs. I'm one of the MCs on Sunday morning, and here's something I read at the beginning of the meeting. Humanists of Greater Portland is a vibrant, good without God community. We use reason, science, and free inquiry to solve social and environmental problems. We hold humans responsible for human destiny. We advocate freedom, happiness, and progress for all humanity. Might be hard to argue with most of that. We see that almost all religions make lists of what to do and believe and what not to do and believe, and they essentially say this: if you believe in A, B, C, D, and do E, F, G, H, and don't do I, J, K, L, you'll live a good life. Humanists say this: live a good life. But that means, once again, is that you don't need a God to be good. You may be closer to us than you think. If there were only 9 commandments, and there was no commandment against killing, would you kill your neighbor if his dog made a mess of your garbage? Again? Of course not.
No, but I might kill the dog. I'd be tempted.
This is humanist, not dogist. You wouldn't kill your neighbor. But why not? For the same reason humanists and atheists and other non-believers act the way they do. Not because some imaginary God ordained it, but because it's right. So we're like you. A bunch of nice people creating a community, trying to make the world better for our children and grandchildren, trying to make our community better, more equitable, fairer, trying to embrace the world and push back on evil and greed. Sound familiar? Here's another difference between believers and non-believers. We have different definitions of some standard cultural terms. In our world, and in scientific papers and professional journals, you'll not see the terms BC and AD, because those are religious rather than scientific. We and the scientists use BCE and CE, before the Common Era, Common Era. And we have humanist celebrants who can marry people and bury people and perform what we call naming ceremonies rather than christenings. And for us, have faith generally means stop thinking. Disengage your critical thinking skills. One of our major concerns about most religions in general is that they're often anti-intellectual. The most famous example is Galileo's house arrest in 1633 for blasphemy, saying the earth orbits the sun. In 1992, a high-ranking cardinal wrote that the church was much more rational and thoughtful about the matter than Galileo was. He became Benedict XVI. But it's okay. They pardoned Galileo in 1992. 359 years after he was charged. And here's another example, one that's not quite so remote, and it raises another issue. Recently in Ohio, the House of Representatives passed a bill that would prohibit teachers from penalizing their students for submitting scientifically wrong answers on a test if the answers aligned with their faith. So on a geology test where the question was, what is the age of the Earth? A correct answer is 6,000 years. I don't know how you feel about that. Scares us pretty good. Not just that Ohio students would be underserved, but that this is state sponsorship of religion. This means the question about Earth's place in the universe could well be answered, not by science, that it orbits the sun according to Newton's laws of motion, but by the Hindu notion that it's sitting on a large turtle that's supported by a huge column of ever larger turtles. I'm not sure that those students' chances at a good university have been helped by that law. And we get very concerned about groups trying to blur the line between church and state. We hope you do too. The Constitution is very clear on this issue, though some areas of the country seem confused about it. The sheriff in Kentucky recently put a very Christian prayer praising Jesus on his department's official Facebook page. That's a church-state violation. Here's another one. The Rhea County schools must finally stop decades of illegal public school Bible instruction. And you might be interested to know that the county seat in Rhea County in Tennessee is Dayton, the city where the Scopes trial was held in 1925. My personal journey toward humanism started when I was about 12 or 13 in a teen version of Sunday school, Missouri Synod Lutherans. My joke was that at the Lutheran family picnic every summer, the first 3 people that smiled got sent home. And I'm sure you know how to tell you are talking to an assertive Lutheran. They look at your shoes. I'm someone who sticks pretty closely to precise, sharp, literal definitions. It's hard for me to accept unproven or vague mystical notions. I generally think that such notions as spoon bending and fortune telling and tarot cards and horoscopes and zombies and numerology all come from a website I refer to as woowoo.com. At Sunday school, for the second time in a few months, you could tell this is bothering me, I asked a question that was really nagging. Is it true that Methuselah really lived 969 years? I was told that yes, that was true. I asked, how do you know it's true? I was told it's true because it's in the Bible. I asked, how do we know that what's in the Bible is true? And the answer is, because it says so in the Bible. The Bible says that everything in it is true. And I thought, hell, I could write a book and say everything in it is true, and there we are. And that did it for me. I'd already read a lot of Norse and Greek mythology, which contained fanciful explanations of everyday events. Weather, the sun and the moon, creation, and peopling of the earth, for example. And I think I knew mythology when I heard it. Toward the end of her life, my mother, who was then almost 91, asked me point blank, do you believe in God? I said, no. She said, I thought I'd raised you better. I said, Mother, you taught me how to think. Probably everyone here today is an atheist about Greek, Egyptian, Roman, or Polynesian gods and their mythological creation legends. I'd agree with you that those creation stories and gods are all just mythology. I spent a month on Crete 10 years ago and could have taken, you ready for this, a guided tour to the cave where Zeus was born. Really? Humanists feel the same way about what I call Hebrew mythology. Just like all the other mythologies, mostly nice stories full of miracles, always way in the past. Heroes and villains. Joseph Campbell, the expert on myths, was asked, what's the definition of religion? He said it was somebody else's mythology. They asked him, well, what's the definition of mythology? Somebody else's religion. Over 20 years ago, in 1998, when I joined the Humanists, we'd see visitors come to our meetings, hesitant, anxious, cautious, trepidatious, not quite frightened, but close to it. They'd be welcomed, and after half an hour or so, they realized this was a place where their non-belief did not endanger them. They were not only safe, but there were others who shared their view of the world. Some almost wept with relief. And this is Portland, Oregon. In many other places, it's far tougher. Much of the Deep South, virtually the first question newcomers get asked at work, at a PTA meeting, in the park, or at a store, is this: what church do you go to? And if you don't go to church, you're well on the outside of groups that include all the believers. On the outside spiritually, of course, but also socially and economically. Another aspect of our humanist chapter's evolution, often in the late 90s and into the middle of the aughts, around 2005 or so. A major general topic of discussion was what religion, by which I mostly mean nasty people using religion to scorn and repudiate and castigate non-believers, had done to our members. Many of them were still hurting from the social and psychological costs of trusting their own reason, rather than following what to them was mythology, although they may not have used that word. For years, we had a monthly discussion group before the Sunday meeting, the topic, surviving religion. It was a tough meeting as people described their shunning by their community and their families, only for the great sin of not believing what others believe. The culture, we've gotten mostly past that. Such comments rarely get made anymore. The culture, at least here in Greater Portland, has changed, and non-believers don't feel the exclusion we once did. One of the major factors that changed everything was the internet. Before then, millions of non-believers thought they were probably the only ones in their community, and were certainly afraid to come out. With the web, non-believers learned they were one of millions, and some others were their neighbors. And many Unitarian churches started adding weekly or monthly humanist discussion groups, which helped a lot. We may be unlike you in some ways, but much like you in other ways. Many houses of worship have outreach programs. We do the same. I'll tell you about a couple of ours. 23 years ago, 3 of our elders set up the humanist counseling services to meet a crucial community need, providing secular low and no-cost counseling. Until we did that, almost all the low-cost, no-cost counseling in the Tri-County area was pastoral. If you're not a believer, hearing about Zechariah or Jeremiah's examples of how to achieve a happy relationship might not reach all the way to you. So we've been doing that for 23 years. Since 2011, we've given out almost 50,000 in college scholarships, and this year we gave out 9,000. We also donated, with a big help from a matching fund, over $9,000 to ameliorate conditions for asylum seekers at our southern border. And we have a program called SMART that's been going on so long, almost no one knows about it, because it's almost invisible to us at the meetings. Over 25 years ago, 3 of our members started managing SMART, and self-motivation and rational therapy, I think it's called, addiction recovery programs, including one at the Coffee Creek Women's Correctional Facility. Once the program gained traction, the people we train now oversee about 30 weekly public meetings in the greater Portland area, with others, such as the ones for vets only through the VA, closed to the public. The major reason we did this was because 5 of the standard 12 steps had to do with the higher power. And for some of us, that's a big stretch. I've shared that many churches do a lot of good in their communities, as we try to do for our community. And I'm all for sharing some of that work, just as you're doing here. This group seems like a perfect example of people coming together, leaving their dogmas at the front door, and working together at tasks that are more important than doctrinal differences. I think your efforts here are of the highest calling, doing good, keeping your door open to everyone. I think this gathering represents the essence of good work, widely shared. But while many churches and mosques and temples and other local gatherings such as this one do much good, I'm much more cautious about religions, which seem much more exclusive and quite capable of causing great harm to people they have purported to nourish and protect. Think of all the parents who have shunned their own children because they're gay or lesbian or transgender based on some doctrinal hatred of sexual minorities. Where's this come from? What anguish and rage and despair and violence does that explode in a family for both the parents and their children? Isn't a basic belief of most religions to protect the family unit? Some of the major religions of the world treat apostates especially terribly. Some even think it's within their rights to murder them just because they have the wrong picture of God in their head. 13 countries on this planet, laws include capital punishment for apostasy or blasphemy. For us humanists, if our fellow humanists leave our group, they just don't renew their membership, and we're sorry to see them go. I want to apologize to anyone here who has felt attacked or scorned or dishonored. I would remind you about observations versus accusations. I hope I brought some understanding and information to you today, and that you can understand better why non-believers are just that. I came here to explain what our non-believer lives are like, our shared beliefs and concerns, how we see ourselves, how others tend to see us, where we are in the belief spectrum, and the price some of us paid for not being in a congregation, for being seen as immoral when all we are is godless, which sadly for many is a synonym for vicious, heinous, rapists, murderers, and the like. Godless is normally an accusation rather than an observation. Mr. Twain, a hero of mine, at once observes nightly, the greatest tragedy in American history is that Plymouth Rock did not land on the Pilgrim. Remember, these are the people who executed 20 of their own members for being witches and then referred to the local natives as savages. Thank you for the gracious offering of your time this morning, and we're so pleased that you stretched the definition of ecumenical enough to include the humanists of Greater Portland. I'm happy to take your questions. We're proud of being part of the work you're doing here and profoundly comforted by your inclusion of our little group and your wonderful efforts. I think David's going to show you some our website and such. And thank you very
Just want
much.
everybody to see it briefly. One of the members, Andrea, who is here every month, I don't know why she didn't show up, has come to a couple of our meetings.
Andrea?
Andrea, yeah.
Did she say anything to you about
No.
coming?
She didn't.
And
The person who did isn't here. Jennifer said she was coming, and isn't here, so.
They trade.
Andrea sent a note to the Unitarian Church that she was out of state. That's all I know.
Who did?
She was out of state?
Out of state. To the Unitarian Church on which list I'm on.
Mhm.
And she's just said she's out of state.
Okay, there it is. Well, of course, all the HGP people have seen this, but a few members haven't. In case you're curious, a lot of people come just when they see that the next speaker sounds like a very interesting topic. So the website shows the next 3 speakers, or they're not always speakers, old vinyl sing-along.
That's amazing.
And
Sharif
next one down.
is not a humanist, for sure.
What's that?
Sharif that was just there.
Right.
in the-
You're right.
Up
Yeah.
here?
Oh, there was a speaker.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
That's
Yeah.
our speaker.
Yeah.
Have you met
These
him?
were people that came in.
Oh, I know Sharif very
Yeah,
well.
he's
The so-called talent show is,
Talent show.
yeah, which unfortunately I'm going to miss. Well, anyway.
The
And
pictures.
there's a brief summary of what humanism is and a little bit of information, so, and if you can scroll,
Yes.
get up to the
Go
top,
up,
yeah.
okay.
And these are the video recordings of all the speakers. the
Oh, these are
people.
videos.
And
Yes.
There's quite
That's
a range of
awesome.
stuff.
That's so cool.
They range from just superb and excellent to, so, anyway.
But one thing, Dave, all the speakers we have are not humanists by any means. We have all kinds
Probably
of
the
people.
majority aren't human.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
majority aren't.
So, you know, you mentioned Sharif, and, you know, he's a pastor, and he does a lot of stuff, religious stuff. But we invited him because he wrote a new book that we liked, and he gave a really nice talk.
That's awesome.
A lot of them are not humanists.
So if you just type in Humanists of Greater Portland, that'll bring up the
Yes,
website
dot
on
org.
the web.
Well, if you do
Portland
that
Humanists.
search, but the
Yes.
website is named Portland Humanists, with
Okay.
the S on the end, dot org,
Okay.
Portland Humanists.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the concert master.
Oh, that
No,
that was
that-
great,
that
that guy
one.
was so great.
That's super cool. Like, oh man.
I want to talk for a minute about a couple of my observations after coming to meetings here for, well, it's not always here, it's changed a couple of times where the meetings have been. There's a lady who used to come all the time, Barbara Campbell, who's a Presbyterian pastor. And I like her a lot, and some years ago when I was more of a intolerant atheist, I would have been skeptical that I could even feel friendly with a Presbyterian pastor, but I've changed my thinking quite a bit. In a chat I had with her a few years ago, I don't remember how we got to this, but she said she wanted to start her own church based on the teachings of Rabbi Jesus. And I remember I was kind of amused by that phrase. I'd never heard that phrase. She didn't have time to really explain it, but I think what she was saying was she likes the teachings of Jesus, and a lot of the other stuff now don't bother with it. And I think if maybe you're gonna help me, Dan.
Sure.
Give me a list, a concise list of what the teachings of Jesus
Oh,
were.
man.
And I would probably like them a lot.
Yeah.
And agree with them. Let's not get too hung up on the literal interpretation of the Bible.
Sure.
One other comment.